Stan Gibilisco here. I just received a very interesting email from a recent subscriber who's indicated quite a bit of interest in my videos, and turns out that he's a radio ham. I guess I shouldn't be terribly surprised by that. But he asked an interesting question. Where were you in 72? That is to say, 1972. Well, let me summarize here. In 1972, I was a senior in high school. I wasn't having a particularly happy year, but I aced the SAT test. I aced the ACT test. I had a scholarship because my dad worked at the Mayo Clinic, called the Mayo Foundation Scholarship, so I could go just about anywhere I wanted. I was so confident in my ability to get into college at those times, even though it was quite difficult, that I selected a very selective college, and it was the only one I applied to, and I knew I'd get in, and I did. I went there and I hated it. So in 1973 I came back and went to Rochester Community College until the following year I went to the University of Minnesota. But in 1972, that was the last year of the draft, and you may remember that a lot of people were still going to Vietnam and having their lives ruined by physical and psychological aspects of that war. Richard Nixon was president. I hadn't voted yet, but I believe that fall in 1972 I did vote, and I confess, for Richard Nixon. If I did vote, it would have been for Nixon. I was the last year where they had that lottery, and my birthday was the first drawing that came up, and I got number 29. So I knew that if the draft continued for very much longer, I was going to Vietnam. Well, I was a radio ham at that time, WA0OKV. I was pretty good at CW and had a lot of knowledge, even though only at that time a general class license. So I figured if it looked like I was going to get drafted, I would enlist, hopefully as an officer, either as a radio man on a ship or possibly even on an aircraft. I was fond of flying, and I thought maybe I should go into the Air Force. But I figured I'd beat him to the punch, and I was going to enlist. I was all ready to enlist, and then they stopped the draft. And I remember, maybe my memory's faulty, I give Richard Nixon credit for having put a stop to the draft. All that nonsense. I knew at least two people who had been destroyed psychologically and to some extent physically because they'd been over in that hellhole that we created for ourselves. Now we're practically allies with Vietnam. The North won. It was the first war the United States ever lost. The first war the United States ever fought without declaring war. It was a mess. And attached to that email, because I had closed comments for the video, my subscriber friend said, or attached an Emerson, Lake and Palmer song that I remember very well. But that's pretty much it in a, shall we say, shell nut. That's me. I'm a shell nut. I was an evolving troglodyte, as all young people are, unless they're fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to get killed before they get old enough to become troglodytes. But I know a few old men who are anything but troglodytes. But so what? So what if I'm a troglodyte now? I remember 1972, and I remember being grateful, even though it may have been misplaced, to Richard Nixon for having kept me from going over there and having my life ruined by that war. The Vietnam War. Oh my, my, my. For those of you who may remember that war, I'm sure you'd just as soon forget it. So that was it. After college, I only applied for one job, even though the job market was exceedingly difficult at that time. The president being Jimmy Carter and he having inherited a real mess. I applied for one job, W1AW operator. And I got it, and I went. Oh, I was an arrogant son of a sea cook. Maybe I still am. Who cares what I am? Where were you in 72? Or hadn't you even been born yet? Stan Gibilisco signing off. Until next time. So long.